Hello, everyone. Welcome back to On Point Politics. And today I'm going to be talking about a dream I had about the 2024 presidential election and how this correlates to the current projection that I have. Now, before we get started with the video, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Make sure to follow the Twitter and join the Discord in the description down below. And so, guys, this is a little bit more of a chill, kind of video-ish sort of, but this is just me kind of recollecting my experience from yesterday. This was actually a pretty vivid dream that I had that actually spanned a lot of election night coverage. They basically kind of opened up the dream that, a lot of African American and Hispanic voters were very, very dissatisfied with the national government as a whole and, Joe Biden specifically. And they started calling the states, and I'm actually going to go mostly from what I remember in order. They basically called Indiana, Kentucky, those states were called in the very beginning. Virginia was, Vermont, excuse me, was called. And they started, kind of opening up stuff in Georgia, North Carolina, Florida. And they started kind of going through these states, a little bit. And by the time they had gotten, they started calling some of the northeastern states, but New Jersey and New York had not been called yet, which was really interesting. They had not been called yet. And before they even called Louisiana, Florida was actually already marked down with South Carolina and Ohio. Louisiana has a different time zone, so they kind of left it blank. And then as the night went on, we kind of got this filled out, and then this kind of came in. And then what was funny is that they called Texas very early, actually. They called it very early. Illinois was called very shortly after poll closing, but not as fast as it usually is. In Colorado was pretty much called right away. And so then, Idaho, Utah were called, and the West Coast was called. And this is what the electoral map was looking like pretty early. Trump actually had a really big lead in the electoral college, and Joe Biden was like at 144 electoral college votes. Then, shortly after, New Jersey and Virginia were called. I think New Jersey was actually like a 7-point victory for Biden. And so, overall, this is very, very interesting kind of scenario. And Virginia was actually pretty competitive. It was within a couple of points. And so that's basically what we're looking at right now. Maine's then was pretty much called. Maine went for Biden. They ended up calling New Hampshire as well. And then Iowa was called as well. And then we're kind of coming down to the certain states. And notice New York was not actually called yet, which was pretty interesting. North Carolina and Georgia were shortly called after. That put Trump at like 248. And since Pennsylvania was such a big lead for Trump, it was actually quite funny is they called Pennsylvania in the dream like pretty early. They actually had it called like almost right away out of all the swing states, because since it's the first swing state to start counting pretty early on, that's really what it was. It's just I think Trump ended up winning it in my dream by about 3 points. And then shortly after, they ended up calling Wisconsin, which kind of gave them the victory. And it was actually a 6.2 percentage point win in the Electoral College. He actually ended up winning it by a pretty substantial amount. And this is what the map looked like in my dream, right as it ended. They didn't end up even calling New York, Hawaii, Alaska. The time zones were not in yet. New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, Minnesota, Michigan, all of these states, they weren't even called yet. And the biggest thing in my dream, which was quite funny, is that New York wasn't even called. And from what I recall, what's actually funny about the state is that Trump was within a couple of points of actually winning it. It was as close as a lot of the swing states that were left open on the map. So this is where my dream kind of ended off. It had Trump at like 277 to 178, which was really interesting. I believe Arizona, Trump was leading in it, because what they had is they also had these kind of things. So I believe in Arizona, he was ahead. He was ahead in Michigan. Biden was still ahead in New York. Funny enough, he was actually ahead in New Mexico, but not Minnesota. And I think Nevada was leading towards Trump. So Trump was on track to get like 314 electoral votes. And that's without even Alaska or Hawaii. This was probably like later into the day at like 10 p.m., 11 p.m. That's probably what it was looking like. And so Trump was, basically on track to win the election in my dream. All I know is that Wisconsin was a likely margin. It was 6.2% exactly. And I remember this because I kept saying out loud, oh my God, he won Wisconsin by 6.2%. Like, that's a massive win. I kept saying it over and over and over again. And I know Pennsylvania, I remember them saying on the TV that it was like a 3-point win for Trump. Now, Michigan didn't get called. Minnesota wasn't either. New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, they weren't called. So this is what the electoral map was pretty much looking like towards the end of the video, or at least like the end of my dream, sort of. And I just kind of wanted to share this because I thought it was a pretty interesting prospect that I had such a vivid dream about the election. I honestly don't recall, anything after that. The last thing I remember was one of my siblings being upset that Trump ended up winning or something. They tend to lean pretty liberal. But no, yeah, this is where my map actually ended off at. It was 277 to 178, which I thought was really, really interesting. That in my dream, the election was called so early. It was like called at like 10 or 11 p.m. It must have been somewhere around there because Alaska and Hawaii hadn't even been called. So it must have been at like 10 or 11. So that's roughly where the map was sitting. I just thought it was very interesting that New York, hadn't even been called yet. They never called it in my entire dream. New York was never filled in, which I thought was really interesting. If Trump were to actually get all of the states on this map, except like Hawaii, theoretically, Trump would actually finish with 356 electoral college votes, which I think is pretty interesting overall. And this is kind of just something I wanted to share. LTE has done a video, Let's Talk Elections, has done a video like this before where he actually had a dream in 2020 and he kind of talked about how Biden, kind of barely won the election like through the Rust Belt, but Trump won, Arizona and Georgia. And this is what the election basically looked like, towards the end. And I think Trump even won Nebraska second. This is what the election looked like. And he said that mail-in ballots, because there was a lot of mail-in ballots, a lot of calls were retracted in these states, and the map ended up looking like this. And then he never got to see Ohio be called. I think they even switched Nebraska second. And then Ohio was just never called in his dream. That's what he talked about in that video. So since I had a dream, I was like, oh, I might as well talk about, what kind of happened in mine. All I know is that when they were talking about, how like the guy, he's like a slightly bigger dude on CNN. He's like kind of a more heavyweight kind of guy. I don't know his name, but he always goes over like statistics and something like that. And like it was Biden's approval rating was like in the mid 30s. His approval rating with Hispanics and African Americans were like really bad. They were like in like the 20s. Like they were like disgustingly bad. I think with blacks he was probably like in the high 30s, but it was still like pretty low for a Democratic president. So he was looking really bad in some of the states, which was quite interesting. And it was funny because Colorado and Virginia, Colorado ended up being like a 7 point win ish for Biden. All I recall is that it was a likely margin, but I'd assume that's probably where it would be. Virginia, I know was lean, but New York was closer when they were counting it than even Colorado and Virginia, which I thought was really interesting. And so this is it for the video. I just kind of wanted to share this a little bit of anecdotal piece. This was a little bit more of an entertainment video per se. And so hopefully the election night does fold out like this because it would be a lot better for this to be done early and to even have New York, be one of the last states to be called. I think definitely would kind of give Joe Biden a little bit of a scare on his way out of the White House. And so that's pretty much it for this video, guys. If you guys did enjoy the video, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. Make sure to go ahead and follow Twitter and join the Discord in the description down below. And I hope to see you guys very, very soon.